My name is Amy. It's been almost 3 years since I got married to my husband, Michael. We are both satisfied with our current jobs and consider having children in the future, but for now, we are dedicated to our careers. Since the beginning of our marriage, Michael has been supporting the household chores, not always equally, but he helps. When I have to work late, he prepares dinner using microwave food, and on weekends, he takes on the washing up. I am not bad at household chores, and I feel our relationship is appropriate as it is. However, recently I have been feeling a small dissatisfaction. It is because Michael has started visiting his parents' house frequently. Previously, we sometimes visited his parents' house together, but lately, he has been going there overnight after work or visiting alone on weekends. The reason is probably due to the death of his father. 6 months ago, his father passed away, and since then, his mother, who used to live with him, has been alone. Michael's brother and his wife, concerned about this, decided to live with his mother, but it seems that their living together has not been going smoothly. Initially, I was also worried about his mother, so when Michael's brother and his wife started living with her, I was very grateful. It was obvious that his mother was very depressed, and everyone hoped she would cheer up a little. After his father's death, when Michael's brother and his wife started living with her, I also visited occasionally to support her. Gradually, his mother began to regain her usual brightness, and there was a time when it seemed that her daily life was returning to normal. But after that, the situation gradually turned ominous. His mother, who used to take care of his father, still had a nurturing nature and started taking care of her grandchildren. Michael's brother and his wife have a daughter, and they were not particularly strict about parenting. But his mother's intervention was quite forceful. She would become furious if meals were not finished completely and would lock the child in a room if she did not follow her instructions. Even when Michael's wife asked her to stop, she would not accept it, saying, "This is discipline. If you don't teach properly, she can't become a good adult." And she would not bend her stance. When I first heard about this incident from my sister-in-law, I was honestly surprised. I wondered if discipline really needed to be that severe. However, since I do not live with them, I felt I had no right to say anything, and I just listened to my sister-in-law's troubles. Meanwhile, one day, my sister-in-law reached her limit and made a suggestion to my mother-in-law. "I will take care of my husband and daughter's household chores, so I ask you, mother, to only take care of your own part." For my sister-in-law, who originally disliked interference from others, this proposal must have required great courage. With the support of Michael's brother, my mother-in-law initially agreed, but since their house is not a duplex completely, it was difficult to completely divide the household chores. Eventually, his mother started interfering with Michael's brother and his wife's household chores again. She entered their room without permission to clean and threw away clothes their daughter liked because they were old. She also ruined my sister-in-law's fancy clothes by washing them as usual. My sister-in-law must have been angry inside but suppressed it and indirectly asked her to stop. "Moving around makes me feel better." My mother-in-law said somewhat oppressively, but my sister-in-law's feelings were completely ignored. My sister-in-law did not feel any effort from my mother-in-law to understand her emotions deeply, and her anxiety and irritation continued to be overlooked. Subsequent events also took place, completely ignoring my sister-in-law's plans and intentions. Despite my sister-in-law's carefully considered meal menus, my mother-in-law prioritized her own preferences and, without warning, purchased multiple lunches on her own. She also intervened in selecting clothes for Michael's brother and his daughter, choosing items that did not suit her taste or style. The clothes chosen by his mother were not usually fashionable but rather were often cheap sale items. His 5-year-old daughter, who had begun to develop her own opinions on clothes, showed no interest in his mother's selection. Initially, Michael's brother and his wife tried to accept the situation calmly, but over time his mother's dissatisfaction became apparent, and she frequently complained, "Why won't she wear what I bought?" In response, my sister-in-law tried to get her daughter to wear the clothes his mother bought, but the daughter steadfastly refused. As expected, My mother-in-law was quick to be angry and sulk, and gradually her dissatisfaction turned towards her daughter-in-law, and harsh words were frequently thrown at her. Thus, my sister-in-law found herself caught between family members and was placed in a very difficult mental state. She endured daily stress while desperately hoping for an improvement in the situation, all for the sake of maintaining peace within the family. Although I couldn't actually do anything, she thanked me by saying, "I could only endure because of your support, Amy. I truly appreciate it." I felt somewhat useful and always listened attentively to my sister-in-law's stories. In such circumstances, an incident occurred. While Michael's brother was away on a business trip, his mother asked my sister-in-law to go shopping. My sister-in-law thought about taking her daughter with her, but his mother said, "I'll take care of her, so go by yourself quickly," and reluctantly, she went alone. However, what my sister-in-law saw when she returned was appalling. Her daughter was completely changed. Her neatly grown hair had been roughly cut off. What happened? This hair. My sister-in-law panicked and rushed to her daughter, who softly answered, "Grandma did it." She confronted her mother-in-law in the kitchen, demanding, "Why would you do such a thing without permission?" But his mother simply said, "Long hair is just in the way for an active girl," and did not apologize at all. Her daughter kept crying, and it was painful for her mother to see, which made her cry too. When Michael's brother returned home, a fierce argument broke out between him and his mother. This situation led Michael to intervene from a neutral standpoint, which subsequently caused him to frequently visit his parents' home. Michael's brother clearly told his mother, "Do not interfere in our lives anymore. If something happens again, I will leave the house," which seemed to upset his mother. Michael is concerned about his mother and visits frequently to support her, but I feel that this issue is not something that can be resolved simply by his intervention. Even as an outsider, it is clear that the fault lies with his mother. His mother might believe that her actions are right, but they can be bothersome to others. For this issue to be truly resolved, it is essential that his mother fully understands the impact of her actions. I have emphasized this to Michael many times, saying, "Your mother needs to understand clearly," but he replies unhelpfully, "It would be better if my sister-in-law was more compliant. She complicates matters because she is so stubborn." It seems that Michael often takes his mother's side. When I point out that his mother also has responsibilities, he counters with, "My mother is a considerate person, and as a result, I end up being scolded." I believe that when people do something for others, they do not cut someone's hair without permission. But to avoid making matters worse, I kept silent. No matter how often Michael goes to his parents' home, it is clear from his behavior that no resolution is being reached. I myself have been busy with work and have had few opportunities to visit his parents' home, but out of concern, I contacted my sister-in-law to inquire about her recent state. As expected, my sister-in-law's and her husband's stress seemed to have increased, and she shed tears over the phone. I appreciate that Michael confronts his mother, but I'm convinced that the fundamental problem won't be resolved unless she changes herself, she said. I completely agree. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me when I think about why Michael focused on short-term solutions and failed to understand the deep feelings of his brother and sister-in-law. While enduring these mentally tough days and wishing to somehow support his sister-in-law and her husband, I returned home from work one day to an unbelievable scene. "Welcome home, Amy," greeted his mother. Mother? Why are you here?" I was surprised. When I asked a question, Michael appeared from the back of the room and said, "I invited my mom here." She seemed uncomfortable at home, while laughing amiably with his mother. Truly, this is no laughing matter. Bringing his mother to our home without permission is not an acceptable action. Holding that thought, I confronted Michael when his mother went to the bathroom. "What's this about? You didn't discuss this with me, did you?" However, Michael justified his actions as if they were appropriate, saying, "Mom just accumulates stress being in that house. That's why I thought a change of environment was necessary." According to Michael, this was supposed to improve his mother's situation, but deciding without consulting me is unreasonable. This only increases my irritation towards him. Indeed, our apartment is family-friendly, and although there indeed was a spare room, it was intended for future use for our children and was then being used as a storage room. Michael has arbitrarily turned it into his mother's room. How long do you intend to have your mother stay here? I asked, to which he replied, well, we'll see how it goes, and then immediately started using his smartphone. Just as his mother returned from the bathroom, I was unable to continue my conversation with Michael. Considering the situation of his brother and sister-in-law, I understand that it is important to keep a physical distance from his mother, but I also live in this apartment. Honestly, it is difficult to live permanently with his mother. Nevertheless, since Michael brought her home, I cannot easily ask her to leave. Feeling the need to address this situation, I sent Michael a message during my lunch break the next day saying, I want to talk without your mother tonight. Let's meet outside after work. I specified the time and place. After work, I went to the agreed place, but no matter how long I waited, Michael did not show up. He didn't reply to my messages, and I couldn't reach him by phone. Worried that something had happened, I decided to go back home. To my surprise, Michael had already returned home when I got there. I couldn't hide my confusion. Didn't I tell you in the message that I wanted to talk? Why did you come home first? I questioned him. I asked Michael in a low voice when his mother was not nearby. Why do we need to talk? Mom is alone at home now. We should return quickly before she feels lonely, he answered. I was left speechless by his response. I was just dumbfounded and couldn't hide my surprise. I had not thought Michael could be this incomprehensible. Previously, Michael's brother and his wife lived close to the parents' home, and our interactions with them were frequent. Because of this, I often relied on Michael's brother and his wife, since we rarely visited his parents' home. I had not realized how much Michael indulged his mother. What should I do? Thinking about this, I couldn't concentrate at work and took the afternoon off, returning home early. That day, his mother said she was going out with a friend, so no one was at home, and for the first time in a long while, I was able to relax alone. Then the doorbell rang, and when I went outside, several large packages had been delivered. Michael doesn't usually shop online, and I hadn't ordered anything recently, so I was suspicious. When I checked the shipping label, all the packages were addressed to his mother, and Michael's name was listed as the sender. Michael intends to keep his mother in this house permanently, I realized immediately. In the evening, I received a message from Michael saying, I'm having dinner with Mom before coming home. At that moment, everything seemed foolish to me, and my affection for my husband rapidly cooled. Previously, I had strongly desired to resolve the issues with his mother, but even that desire had faded. That night, I went to sleep alone without waiting for Michael and his mother to return. The next day was Michael's day off, and while I was having breakfast, he got up. Mom's packages might arrive today, so please receive them. I'm going shopping with her, he said nonchalantly. Without looking at him, I replied, I sent them back. He suddenly got angry and shouted, why would you do that? Calmly, I responded, it's difficult for her to live here permanently without discussing it. Michael became furious and said, then you can leave. But I no longer felt shocked. I left the house and went to my parents' home. During that time, Michael contacted me several times, but each message was essentially telling me to apologize. Fed up with the nonsense, I immediately blocked his calls. Later, I prepared the necessary documents and decided to return to the apartment in a few days. When I pressed the intercom, Michael appeared and said mockingly, have you finally come to apologize? While glaring at him, I declared, I'm coming back to this apartment. Hearing my statement, he seemed to misunderstand that I was apologizing. I did not miss his smug expression. I continued to speak calmly. So, could you and your mother please leave this place? What? His eyes widened in surprise. As he looked confused, I took out some documents. Remember? This apartment originally belonged to my parents. Michael's eyes widened further, and he was clearly shaken as he lost his words. Ignoring Michael, I continued talking. And here is the divorce form. Sign it. If you don't want to, I will go through a lawyer. Don't think you can avoid the divorce, okay? Michael's face turned pale rapidly, and he started to panic as if he finally realized the seriousness of the situation. He suddenly changed his attitude towards me. He repeated meaningless apologies over and over and made various excuses. But those words no longer reached me. My determination to divorce Michael had not changed. Seeing him panic, I felt no sympathy at all, which probably meant that my love for him had been gone for a long time. Still, I gave him one last warning. Hey, don't bother your brother and his wife anymore. If something happens next time, I will support them and make things difficult for you. Hearing this, Michael's shoulders slumped, and the next day, he left the house with his mother. The two returned to his parents' home, but Michael's brother and his wife are no longer there. After his mother came to our house, his brother's family moved out immediately, and they are now living peacefully as a family of 3. Meanwhile, I live alone in the apartment, enjoying fulfilling days in both my work and private life. I still maintain a close relationship with Michael's brother and his wife, meeting occasionally to dine together. However, I have completely cut ties with my former husband and his mother, saying I will never interact with them again. For myself, this has become an opportunity to aspire to a more peaceful and happy life, paying attention to avoid similar situations in the future. Every couple, over time, experiences various problems and many difficulties. However, regarding us, we had lived peacefully without major issues for 40 years. That was how I felt about it. Little did I know, we were about to face a pitfall I never imagined. Suddenly, my husband Frank proposed a divorce. When he announced the separation, he was holding a splendid bouquet of flowers. That day was his 65th birthday, and he had just retired from his job. The bouquet, a retirement gift from his colleagues, was adorned with flowers in soft shades of orange, pale yellow, light blue, and white. Looking at the bouquet, I couldn't help thinking, oh, it looks expensive. Maybe worth $200 or $300. A bit stingily. As I was absent-mindedly staring at the bouquet, Frank gently smiled and handed it to me, saying, "Dorothy, thank you for all the hard work." How embarrassing. Reflecting on it, I realized I had never received a bouquet from Frank since we met. He always said, bouquets are an unnecessary luxury. So whenever we celebrated, we always dined out luxuriously. When I asked him what he wanted for his birthday during our early dating days, his reply was something like, all-you-can-eat barbecue. Moreover, since he lacked the sense of gifting others to bring them joy, I had never received a present, not even flowers, for my birthday. It was surprising that Frank, of all people, chose to give me a bouquet on his retirement day. It was clear he didn't buy it himself and probably thought, I don't need a bouquet. But I still felt happy. What's this all about? Well done, Frank. Now you can relax and enjoy doing what you love, I said, a bit overwhelmed. While my heart was still fluttering as I received the bouquet, Frank said seriously, "Thank you for helping around the house. You're not needed anymore. I want a divorce. I will live with my mother from now on." Frank and I were high school classmates and started dating in our second year. After breaking up and getting back together several times, we married on my 25th birthday. Our relationship was more like friends of the opposite sex who got along well, and we married because being with each other was fun and comforting. We have 2 children, but parenting wasn't too burdensome as our parents loved their grandchildren and actively helped out. We were able to enjoy work and leisure, sometimes together and sometimes separately with our friends. This is why we faced fewer issues than a typical couple. There was just one instance when Frank had an affair in his 40s, and by the time I found out, they had already broken up. I discovered a photo of Frank cozily close to his mistress, presumably taken during a company trip, in his bag about 6 months later. Even though we had a friendship like marriage, Finding that photo was a huge shock. When I confronted him, he readily admitted to the affair, which lasted about 2 months after the trip. He told me plainly, "I felt lonely when you were busy with work and often stayed in hotels, and my heart wandered to a female assistant." Maybe I should have expressed more strongly how much that incident had shocked me. But in the end, you were the best. That girl always wanted accessories or to watch foreign romance movies, which was troublesome. "I've come to appreciate your good points again," he said, and I felt inclined to forgive him. So, we didn't take any major steps like divorce. I realized I had also been underestimating Frank, so I decided to quit my job and reflect on this. That was about the extent of our major marital issues. But it seems it wasn't the same for Frank. He said he had felt uncomfortable since our honeymoon. "I wanted a trip focused on dining, but you selfishly chose a sightseeing-centric itinerary. Even during the tours, I was just hungry, and the meals provided were ordinary. I felt at that time that you were someone who didn't consider my preferences." What? He had been thinking that for 40 years. I was really shocked inside. Sure, our honeymoon was sightseeing-focused, but who was it that enjoyed it at the time? Who was the one who went out on a special night tour, leaving me at the hotel suffering from jet lag? Even with jet lag, if you were really interested in enjoying the trip, you could have rested properly on the plane. It's all about mindset. That's ridiculous. Frank had always been somewhat self-centered, but I never thought he was this bad. As I stood there speechless, Frank said, "It would be hard to leave suddenly, so I'll give you a month. Please take all your things and leave during that time." And then he went back to his room. Thinking of pleasing Frank, I had prepared high-quality beef, fine wine, and cakes made by a renowned pâtissier, all arranged on the living room table. And I had even laid a stylish tablecloth. As I looked at this scene, tears started to flow. The next day, as Frank was about to go out, I approached him and asked why he considered divorce and chose to tell me on his retirement day. Frank coldly replied, "While I was employed, I needed your help for household chores and to take care of me. But now that I'm retired, you're no longer needed. A housemaid can replace your role." After that, Frank hardly interacted with me, didn't eat the meals I prepared, or even gave his laundry for washing. When I asked how he was managing meals and laundry, he said he was using restaurants and coin laundries. "I've made preparations so I can live without you." Nowadays, a man can manage alone. I see, so Frank really only saw me as a household helper while I was working. I was also working and contributing $2,100 a month for living expenses. And to think this is what it came to on his retirement day. Feeling there was nothing more to say, I decided to first talk with our children. Frank and I have a 39-year-old son and a 37-year-old daughter, both married and living in nearby states. I called them to a cafe and revealed that I was considering a divorce. My son immediately responded, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But when did you realize, Mom?" "Realize what?" As I looked puzzled, my son also seemed surprised. "Wait, you really didn't know? Dad's been having an affair with a younger woman." My son said he saw Frank and a young woman heading towards a motel while he was walking in a busy district on a sales call. When I expressed shock, Frank initially panicked, but then said, "It's just for fun, Mom knows about it." "Remember when you were 20, how Dad had an affair with a colleague from work?" Mom was calm about it then, and I thought it would be the same this time. My son casually mentioned this, Frank having an affair again. And to think he was deceiving me with such lies. I had believed him when he said he would live with his mother after our divorce, but that turned out to be a lie too. As I was stunned, my daughter suggested using a detective agency to investigate Frank's actions. Indeed, there's no point in just being shocked. It would be regretful to let this end without doing anything. I decided to conduct a thorough investigation. After a week of investigation, it was revealed that Frank's mistress was a front desk worker at his company, and he was giving her a set amount of money as an allowance every month. A detective recorded their conversation in a cafe, where it was heard that the allowance was about $1,000 per month, and the woman was asking for more. Frank's response was, "I plan to divorce my wife, so let's get married. I'll arrange for more than enough money." So that's why he was trying to get me out of the house. My children suggested that I talk to this woman. However, I wanted to shock Frank and his mistress in a more effective way. After researching extensively on the internet and consulting a lawyer acquaintance, I found a way to have a significant impact on them. A few days later, I called Frank to the living room and said, "I accept the divorce, but we need to properly settle the compensation and property division." Frank immediately responded, "We should split half of the money in each of our bank accounts and half the value of this house and land. That's about property division. But first, let's talk about compensation. I intend to demand $50,000 from you." Why? Late life divorces aren't uncommon. Why do I have to pay that much? As Frank scoffed, I showed him several photos of his affair. "This should explain why you need to pay compensation," I said, and Frank looked shocked. "Besides, I recorded your conversation, and I know she gets an allowance of $1,000 every month. Oh, and planning a trip to celebrate 3 years of dating and marriage? That means for 3 years, you've been giving her $1,000 monthly. That money belongs to our marital assets, so I'll include it in the property division." One more fact. Frank had left an open credit card statement scattered everywhere. After collecting and scrutinizing them, I found suspicious expenses totaling over $20,000, including stays at high-end hotels in the capital and purchases from famous international brands for women. I would also include these in the property division. By the way, I found a lease agreement for an apartment from 3 years ago under your name. I had a detective check, and it turns out your mistress lives there. I'll include that rent in our shared assets too. As I calmly presented all these facts, Frank's face went pale. A natural reaction considering these amounts added up to nearly $100,000. It was later revealed that Frank had about $50,000 in his account at the time. Frank thought he would just have to pay me half of that, $25,000, but with a total of about $150,000 in savings calculated, he now needed to pay me about $75,000. "Wait, how much do you have in your account?" "Half of that is mine," Frank exclaimed in panic, so I showed him my bank book. There was about $70,000 in my account. This meant that Frank was entitled to $35,000, so he needed to pay me $40,000. Additionally, when I mentioned that the house and land should also be divided as part of the property settlement, he claimed, "This house and land are in my name. They are not shared property." However, legally, the house and land are considered shared property regardless of whose name they are under. I should also add that I've paid for all the house repairs from my account. Remember, this house was second-hand and needed repairs several times? The total cost was about $50,000, so you owe me half of that, $25,000. Even if we sold the house and land and split the proceeds, Frank would not end up in debt, but he was quite disappointed, thinking he would receive the entire sale profit. But I just laughed and said, "Too bad. Here's the divorce papers." As I handed them over, I saw a slight smile on Frank's face. Pretending not to notice, I urged him, "Sign it quickly. I'm planning to submit it right now." After he signed on the spot, I grabbed the documents and hurried to the city office. When I returned home 30 minutes later, Frank was sitting confidently on the sofa. It seemed he thought everything was resolved with our earlier conversation. Then I delivered the final blow. Let's talk about your retirement benefits. His face showed full confidence. Unfortunately, I haven't received my retirement benefits yet. They won't come in for another 3 to 4 months. We're divorced now, so that money isn't shared property, he declared, just as I expected. Feigning surprise, I asked, "Really? That's terrible. How much will you receive?" Frank proudly answered, $120,000. Impressive, right? That amount is average for a small to medium-sized company. So, I'll be receiving $60,000, right? Wait, hold on. The retirement benefits will be paid after our divorce. Frank replied in shock. That's the thing. Even after divorce, retirement benefits are subject to property division. I read online about a case where a couple divorced 5 years before retirement, and the retirement benefits were divided. So, if you don't sell this house and land, your assets will be negative. But even if you sell, you won't get enough money to satisfy your mistress. With that, Frank looked completely stunned, his mouth agape in disbelief. Poor thing. By the way, when we had the house appraised, it was valued at about $300,000, including the land. If we sold it, we could each get about $150,000. But Frank's mistress had insisted on not selling the house, so Frank reluctantly agreed to pay me $150,000. Including the $50,000 in compensation, Frank ended up with a total debt of $200,000. It's puzzling why his mistress, who is still in her 30s, was so smitten with the older Frank and fixated on that house. Despite being old, the single-family house in the city with good transport accessibility must have been attractive. After they remarried, Frank's new wife's parents brought all their furniture and moved into that house. As a result, Frank, who had planned a leisurely life with his retirement benefits, property division, and pension, now had to support his new wife and her parents with just his pension, while also struggling to repay debts. Eventually, he had to look for work again, probably earning around $30,000 a year at over 65. Additionally, since I claimed $20,000 in compensation from his new wife, their marital relationship is reportedly very strained. It's only a matter of time before Frank loses that house. Moreover, due to the rental apartment he rented for his mistress, which was occupied by someone else, a breach of contract occurred. I notified the real estate management company, resulting in a penalty fee. Really, it's quite pitiful. As for me, I had a good income originally, so I moved into a luxury apartment after the divorce and am living comfortably. I work 3 days a week at a supermarket that hires people even at 65. My daughter's house is nearby, so I live in peace. My granddaughter, just entering middle school and in her rebellious phase, cares for her recently divorced grandmother and visits often. She's a very kind girl. Though I no longer have a husband, my time with my granddaughter has increased, and I'm truly enjoying these happy moments.